Hey YouTube fans, this is Bertie Coleman III, and I'm here to bring you another video dealing with education, but also something that was near and dear to me. As an assignment for my doctoral class, Challenges in Rural Education, we were to review a movie called Raising Bertie, and this was dealing with the rural life in Bertie County, North Carolina. The title itself is very misleading. You would think that this was a person that they were talking about raising, but in fact it's not. It's talking about a county that involves different people telling their stories as they evolve and grew into the people that they are now. This particular movie documentary hit home. It hit home quite hard. Not to say that it was something that I probably went through personally, but I knew people that went through these things. I knew people that didn't exactly make it out. I knew people that did make it out, and there were small elements that I could relate to as far as the living situation, the psychological implications of things, so on and so on. Like the story, it follows three young men. The first one, his name is Reginald. They call him Junior. The second one, his name was David. They call him Bud. And then the third guy, they called him Day Day, even though his real name was Devontae. Now, these boys, they evolved in their own way to make comfortable lives for themselves. No, they are not living lavish lives like people would think they live in the ending of a movie. They don't get that kind of happy ending, but they get a happy ending that doesn't involve them being in jail, being dead, or having to wonder, what are they gonna do? One of the things that people have gotten to in life is that they are afraid to accept the truth about rural life. Rural life is not the comforting Hallmark movies that you see on the Christmas and Thanksgiving time. No, it's not like that at all. It's rough, it's dark, it's grimy. And this Raising Bertie movie definitely brings out that darkness that's in the rural area, but it also provides a little bit of light in the process. So the quote that opens up in the movie, it says, "I am what time, circumstance, history have made me of. Certainly, but I am also much more than that. So are we all." This is from James Baldwin's Notes of a Native Son, and it is immediately bombarded on us, like immediately. Like this was the thing. This was the theme of the entire documentary. It makes for a great conversation piece, because you want to be able to ask the people around you, or if you're in education, you want to ask the students, what does this quote mean to you? So I'll go first. It is true that we are what time, circumstance, and history will make of you. The time I was born in the 90s raised me to be a person who respects the elders, who respects the people around me in general, someone who has a caring heart, someone who can give as much as he is willing to receive. Circumstance put me in a situation where I had to grow a little faster than I wanted to, and history has taught me that I cannot put my future family, my future children, my future grandchildren, I cannot put them in the situation that I was in, as far as like a split home, or dealing with the mental illnesses that are out there, things, so on and so on. I have to be the person that generates a whole new brand of wealth, which is where that second part of the quote comes in. It says, "I am also much more than that. So are we all." We all have an opportunity to create better futures, not just for ourselves, but for those around us, those that are going to come from us. I'm not sure who made this next quote, but it says, "If you do not come from a wealthy family must come from you." This is a complimentary quote that could go directly with this, because I know in my heart, I plan on making a wealthy family. I am going to have a wealthy family that will come from me. whenever God decides to bless me with the other things that he decided to bless me with, a wife, a respectful wife, and the opportunity to get married to her and to create that family. In the meantime, I'm doing the Lord's work right now by being a teacher. So there was a part in the documentary where there was something called the Hive Alternative School. And the Hive Alternative School was basically a place where boys went to because they didn't have an official alternative school, much like the counties here in Alabama. There's a lady, her name was Vivian Saunders. She was the director of the Hive Alternative School, and it looked a whole lot like a rehabilitation center. There were black boys there, mostly black boys there. You saw no white boys, you saw no Asian boys, no other nationality was there but black boys. And it hurt because I'm seeing a stereotype or a statistic immediately, and I'm almost wanting to cry as I watch this movie. I'm glad I wasn't watching it with anybody else, because I don't think they would understand that those 3 boys could have been me. If I didn't have the support system that I had in my rural area, I could have been a statistic just like those 3 boys at that point in that time. Or I could have been worse. I could have just been dead. But thank the Lord that I'm here. She made a comment that says, I believe in the it takes a village mentality. I can't quote her directly at the moment, but she did mention that it takes a village. And she also states that African American males have had to prove themselves because of the way that it was imprinted in them. That nobody would love them unless they were able to prove themselves to be useful, to be of worth. Chris Rock wrote a piece, and he said that the black man could not be loved unless he was able to provide something, which I find it to be very true, especially considering watching this movie now, seeing that these boys did these things because they wanted to be able to not only provide for themselves, but to make their moms and other people proud, because they knew that if they did not make it, they would fall, and that they would be seen as that disgrace, or that quote unquote that nigga that's just walking around doing nothing. And personally, I did not want to be just that nigga that's just walking around doing nothing. My mama wasn't gonna have it. So taking the village to raise a child, she stated it because her influence was in there. The teachers that were there at the alternative school, they were black males, strong black males. The probation officer that shows up with Bud in the later scenes, he did his part. The football coach that encouraged Day to play football, he did his part. The girlfriends that they all had, they all encouraged each of the boys in their respective areas to at least go for something more than just wanting to exist, to survive. So while the village mentality still exists, it's fair and few. I am one of the ones that believe in the village mentality, because while my father was around for like 9 or 10 years, my mother placed me with people that she trusted, people that she knew had the discerning spirit to say, hey, this child is going somewhere. I need to protect this child as if he were my own, because my sister in Christ has asked me to look out for him. And this has been other family members. These have been friends of hers, and they have been christened as family for me. Like, even to this day, there are still some people that I call auntie, uncle, cousin. I call some of them grandma and grandpa. And I even have a male figure in my life who I call Pop, because he stepped in the early years of my life and kept me relatively on track. He taught me the things that my father should have taught me. And I am forever grateful for him in my life. He may not always hear me because, we're far apart now, but I go and I see him whenever I get a chance. I talk to him whenever I get a chance to, and I let him know, be like, hey, I'm out here doing the Lord's work. Same as you, but much rougher. He goes out and he evangelizes the word. And a part of me wants to be at least like a part of like him, because the things he taught me, he's not a perfect man. We know this. And nobody's perfect. But he taught me the things that I needed to learn at that time. And I'm grateful for that. So looking at how this is affected in the movie, Saunders, the educators in the movie, we all have a purpose. We all have a purpose in rural education. Yes, I realize that city, suburban, and urban are in their categories as well, but we're not going to focus on them because they don't have that difficulty that rural areas have. We rural teachers, parents, community members, we have to take back the village mentality and own up to it. Yes, I get it. There are parents out there that do not want to discipline other parents' children because of things that might come about, the negative consequences of it. But I'm a walking example that there is nothing wrong with the village mentality. If I was out of line, I got a whooping from somebody around the village, and they made sure my mama knew that, hey, he was out of line, but I took care of it. And even if she said, okay, I still got a whooping when I got home. So we have to get back into being that, even if it means making sacrifices to, give time, give effort, even with money sometimes, because let's be honest, the rural area does not have as much money as the other areas. And this documentary shows a great example of that. Like, let's take the opening scene, for instance. It depicts that rural area. It's got the farm life in North Carolina. You got the mill jobs, all the trailer parks, all the trailers are right next to each other, kind of like there is in the South. The little shops, the barber shops, for instance, you have like a bunch of black guys in the barber shop. They're all talking. That's therapeutic in the South. You don't get too many of those kinds of scenes in the North. It's more of a Southern thing. The young man that's opening up, he's talking about how the houses are tight knit together. And if any of you that are watching this are from the South, or that you've known about the rural areas, there are families who have built houses around each other to give that sense of community. They built their own communities. In the area where I teach at, Wilcox County, there are lots of houses that are around each other, because you will find the families that just built their empires there, like their southern empires, I like to call them. And that's just where the families have always ended up. Most of them tend to stay in that area. They don't tend to move. Most of them don't tend to branch out, which is fine. So we call them makeshift communities, subdivision neighborhoods. They all have a name. And part of that purpose of making a makeshift community was to make sure that all the kids could be looked out for one another. I can remember growing up when mom had to go to work during the summer. If I wasn't staying by myself, I stayed with another relative, or I stayed with a friend of a relative. And if they had kids, we all played together. Like, we would go outside and play basketball, football, or one of the parents would take all the kids and get them something to eat, and we would have like a game night, a movie night. So we just knew that our parents did what it took to make sure that we had what we needed in order to be able to stay out of trouble and make something of ourselves. As we were following the stories in the movie, I noticed that Day Devontae, he had a problem as a loner. He begged for his father's attention, and he wanted to do things not only so he can avoid being in trouble, but he was hoping that his father would be able to show up. This Devontae was the one that impacted me the most because I struggled with my own father. And I'll be honest, there is still a struggle 20 years later. I asked my father many times to be there for me without realizing that I was asking for it. You tugging at your father, be like, Dad, I need you here. I need you here. Mama can't do this by herself. And I think about it sometimes. It creates a hole in my chest because I knew my mom. I knew she could do what she could. I knew that she would do what she could. But she admitted to me that, she can't do it all by herself. Well, the one thing that she told me she couldn't do was teach me how to be a man. That was the one thing that kept her from literally being able to say that she could do it all by herself. And I grew up hating my father for years while still begging for his attention. Mom was always there. She made the sacrifices, left work to come to my baseball games, to my achievement award ceremonies, to academic events I competed in her work clothes. And she would be tired by the time we got back home. But she went to sleep knowing that her baby did something that was worth making that sacrifice for. And meanwhile, when it came to paying stuff off to get my class ring, my senior stuff, the graduation stuff, she had to find a way to make it happen. My dad, on the other hand, he was just there. Well, not there. It made me hate him even more. As I got older, I'd say I was about 20 years old when this next event happened. It was April 27, 2011. The tornado that struck Tuscaloosa, it also struck Choctaw County, and it took my home away. I asked my father, to help us out. I didn't really ask him to just give me stuff. I just want to help. And he came with the same answer as he did the last decade that he did it with. He said, I don't have anything to help you with. And I clearly knew that he did. It affected me so. And so when I watched Devontae go through his struggles of watching his father make excuse after excuse and the relationship being strained, I knew in my mind that this was the heartbreaker. This was that moment where I might have would have shed a few tears for him and his situation, because I've been there. I've cried several nights wishing that my father was in my life, but not knowing the true reason that he wasn't in the first place. As it would turn out, as much as I wanted my father to be in my life, to be the parent that he was supposed to be, it was good that he wasn't there. It was good that my mother did what she did to teach me all that she taught me, because I have a determination to be a better man than my father ever was. And my hope is that when I get married and create a family, I pray that I will become a better man than my father has ever been. I pray that I will become the leader that my wife needs, that my children will need. And looking at Devontae's story has just reassured that I will make those choices to be better than my father in that aspect. The good news is that Devontae's relationship with his father did seem to take a bit of a positive turn. And so with him being in that form, that particular state of mind, I guess you can say that even though we don't know the full details of what happens after the fact, we can make a pretty good guess that his father has begun to do what he needs to do in order to be in his life again. And so, as I close, I wanted to say that no one is perfect. No area that you live in is perfect. Every area that you live in, rural, suburban, city, urban, it all has some kind of thing, some kind of struggle that you deal with. But if I had to say which area would struggle the most, I would definitely say the rural area struggles the most. This documentary is a confirmation of that very fact. Am I a fan of this? No, I am not a fan of the struggles that happen in rural areas. They are unique. They are in its own right a struggle within itself. I can't imagine being in their situation without the support that I had. I can't imagine being a child that was 10 times worse than I was when I was hating my father. I can't imagine being in that situation. So as a rural educator now, I seek to make life better for those around me. I seek to make the life better for the kids that are coming up, even though I'm having a hard time making that connection. I have a hard time relating to them because I'm not directly in their shoes. I've only tied them up from time to time. I've only laced them up. But I'm not going to give up on them. I'm not going to give up on the kids, even if I'm the only one that's left. They may frustrate you because they're not reaching that expectation that you can see them reaching for, but you have to realize this is not your fault. If you are an educator out there and you're struggling in the rural area, know that this is not your fault. You are battling a force that is way stronger, that has existed way longer than you, and it is a force that you cannot defeat on your own. Just as it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village in order for us to make an impact, to make a change. So, rural educators out there, stick together, come together, pull together, and we can raise more than just Bertie County. We can raise Wilcox County. We can raise Tuscaloosa County, Choctaw County, Sumter County. We can raise any county in the state of Alabama, or eventually we can raise any county in the United States. Our goal is to basically produce growth. This has been my review, which, by the way, I give a 10 out of 10. And I hope that I can do more videos of this. In the meantime, if you are an educator, or if you just have questions or testimonies or stories that you want to tell, you can leave a comment down below. And this has been another production. God bless.